Well, everyone, thanks for joining us on looks like a rainy Monday here in the Pacific Northwest. I know we have students from around the West Coast. So again, just thanks for joining on a Monday. I know it's about to be Thanksgiving break for most of y'all, so we just really appreciate it. So we'll just go into it. So my name is Michael Janney. I'm a current Gonzaga University student and a future TFA Corps member. I'll be serving in Memphis, Tennessee this coming fall. And today we're going to be talking about translating servant leadership skills into the workplace. So really quickly, let's go over the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about what Teach for America is. If some of you don't already know, we'll introduce our panelists, and then I will hand it off to Dean Anderson, who has a few questions for our panelists, and we'll do a little discussion. And then if you, as the audience, have any questions, please either directly message me, drop them in the chat, or just get ready to say them out loud when we get to that segment. So let's just really quickly talk about what Teach for America is. So what Teach for America is, it's directly addressing one issue in the United States especially, which is educational inequity. I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to most of you that there is a lot of discrepancy between where you live and the education you get. Your zip code determines a lot about your outcomes and the available outcomes you have as a student. And a lot of this comes from poverty, divisions upon our history, a weak economy over the last year has exacerbated a lot of this. Students aren't learning. A lot of students aren't getting the skills and knowledge they need to go on to higher education, go into their careers, thrive, and be able to support themselves and their families. And what is Teach for America? So what Teach for America is trying to solve that issue by taking young, driven, awesome leaders and developing and teaching them to be servant leaders, especially in the classroom for 2 years. For 2 years, you are a paid teacher of your school district, serving in the classroom, learning, training, developing, and teaching in a specific subject. So like myself, I'll be doing special education in Memphis, Tennessee. But then the whole point of Teach for America is that it's not just those 2 years you're a servant leader, you're a servant leader for the rest of your life. After those 2 years, wherever you end up, like a lot of our panelists today, most of them have ended up in the private sector, but they continue to work towards that educational equity, which in any way they can. If that's educating their coworkers, if that's leading some kind of diversity group, whatever that looks like after their 2 years. It's a really great mission, and I'm truly really passionate about it. But we won't berate this anymore. Let's introduce some of our panelists. So we have Catherine Zaloni. She is a former TFA Hawaii Corps member, 2008, a graduate of Gonzaga University. She started her career, obviously, in teaching, and then got her master's in education, and then started working for WE Communications. And her clients are pretty wide and ranging. It's actually really interesting. She's worked with everyone from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Microsoft, and just so many different organizations across here in the Pacific Northwest. Then with Camille Merritt, she was a TFA New York Corps member in 2008, teaching English, who went on to help launch a pretty successful startup called Eden, where now she is the VP of Operation and New Initiatives. Then we have Andrea Pappas, who is a TFA Chicago Corps member in 2014, who now works as a human resource generalist, an HR professional with Snap Inc., which is a Snapchat. So I'm going to pass this on over to Dean Anderson, so we just have plenty of time for a really great discussion and also get some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for taking the time to put this panel together. As everybody knows, I think Gonzaga is well known for its graduates going on into various types of service, including Teach for America. And I think it's always a great opportunity for our students and community members to be able to learn a little bit more about those opportunities and hear about the experiences that our alums have had. So I also want to thank Camille, Andrea, and Catherine for taking the time out of their busy day and week here in a holiday week. And so got some questions for you, and feel free to alternate who goes first. And like Michael said earlier, if anybody in the audience has questions, raise your hand, put them in the chat, whatever, and we'll make sure we get to them before we're done today. So let's start with an easy one. Tell us a little bit about your postgraduate service. The three of you were in radically different places than Spokane. So if you could talk a little bit about that postgraduate service and what it was like, maybe challenges, maybe surprises, that would be great.
Sure, I can kick us off. So I was placed in Hawaii for Teach for America, and I feel very lucky about that for the obvious reason that it's Hawaii and it was beautiful. And while we were incredibly busy teaching and simultaneously getting our master's, which was part of the TFA program requirement, it was nice when we had those few free hours on the weekends to be able to go to the beach. But there's so many more reasons why I continue to feel so grateful that I got placed in Hawaii, because there's a lot of similarities with the Hawaiian culture, you know, to like the Native American population. And so the Hawaiian culture, the indigenous people, it's such a beautiful culture. And my students at my school took hula classes after school, and the community is all about ohana, which means family. And it was such a beautiful culture to live in and learn about. Of course, Hawaii is part of the United States, but in so many ways it feels different, especially in the community where I was, where, you know, more than 90% of the kids at the school I taught at were at least part Native Hawaiian. So it was excellent for me as a white woman to finally feel what it's like to really be a minority and to learn so much about the Hawaiian culture. So that was just an extra blessing for me when it came to where I got placed. I taught first grade and my first year and looped with those same group of kids to second grade, which was fantastic because then I had them for 2 years. So I'm still in touch with those students. I don't know how many years now, Camille, we're both 2008, like a decade later, which is wild. They're now like grown-ups themselves, but being able to have that same group of kids for 2 years was really wonderful. And then I ended up staying on a third year and taught second grade again at that same school. So that's just a gist about me.
Thank you.
Cool. I can jump in next. Yeah, 2008. So I was on the opposite side of the country. I was in New York City. I taught 7th grade math. For any of you who have interacted with 7th graders, you know that it is a challenge in and of itself, 12, 13, and a lot of things happening. So I think one big takeaway for me as getting into teaching is that it's not just about teaching, you know, mathematical principles or anything like that. There's a lot of social and emotional things that are going on. And I think that was a pretty big eye-opener from my experience. Also going from, I grew up on Whidbey Island, which is just north of Seattle, small town. Went to Spokane, which was a big town for me. And then to move to Manhattan was very dramatic, but it was exactly what I wanted. And I felt like I learned so much about diversity, just like a totally different way of life. And for me, it was a major eye opener and has really carried with me throughout my career. And the one thing that I'd say, a lot of, you know, what Kat was saying really resonates, but I'd also add that I felt like in those early couple of years, I had so much autonomy to make decisions and like really challenge myself that so many of my classmates didn't have in those first couple of years out of college. And I felt like I learned so much from that. I only spent 2 years in the classroom. I taught 7th grade both years. And then I relocated to the Bay Area and joined a education nonprofit. So I stayed very close to the education space for a while. And I volunteered at an organization called Minds Matter, which is a national organization, but I was in the one in San Francisco. So have remained pretty close to the general like mission associated with Teach for America.
Hi everyone, my name's Andrea. I'm based here in Seattle, so not too far from those of you that are hunkering down still in snowy Spokane. Graduated in 2014 and then went on to join the Chicago, Northwest Indiana core group. So in between where Camille and Catherine were in Middle America. I had never been to Chicago until the weekend I moved to Chicago. So it was all sorts of new beginnings right from the start. The school I taught was an elementary charter school, which right off the bat was completely different from anything I was used to. I come from a long history of different family members being involved in education, and the idea of a charter school can sometimes be a little bit controversial. So right away I had great conversations with my family members, including my mom, who's a longtime teacher. She's been a teacher for going on over 30 years. Taught elementary school, so I taught 3rd grade, 4th grade, and then my first year I actually started teaching 1st grade. So I did the 2 years of TFA and then stayed on for a 3rd year to loop with my 3rd graders to then teach 4th grade. One of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's really made me who I am today. And I met my husband through the program, so that was a big plus. But I promise I didn't go into Teach for America to meet my husband. Just happened to be a side perk. My school was 100% African American. I grew up in Bellevue, Washington. So for those of you that are familiar with the area, predominantly white. I really hadn't interacted with any racial injustices or poverty. So it was smack dab, right? Hit me in the face right when I got there. And I would say my first year teaching, I really just had to lean on the really experienced teachers in my school, and I really learned how to ask for help, which was something I was never comfortable with before. And even though I'm not in the education spectrum right now, it's still something I constantly do in my career today, ask for help when I need it, and it's such a valuable lesson.
Cool. Thank you. Quick question before I move to the next question, because I know it's something that always comes up with Zags who are considering service post-graduation. Specifically with Teach for America, did any of you have much teaching experience before you went out and joined Teach for America?
I had none. I was a finance and marketing, like business administration, finance marketing major.
Yeah, none on my side. I actually, going into college, I told myself I wasn't going to go into education because I had all these family members that did. And I wanted to be different and do something completely on the other side. So I graduated with my degree in political science and Spanish, which I am not really using either of them today. But no, I had no experience. I think my only experience was teaching like Sunday school, helping out my mom.
Okay.
Yeah, I also didn't have any education experience, but like Andrea, I have a ton of family members who are educators. So for me too, it was always something that I actually thought about, unlike you, Andrea, wanting to go the opposite. Because, you know, it's like if you have a family of nurses or educators, whatever, that really kind of does run through your veins. And so education was always something I was interested in. I did double major in public relations and international studies. So I wasn't pursuing education, but I knew I wanted to do some kind of service program after college. And when I found out about TFA, it just was like the perfect mix. It was this incredible mission I was really passionate about. And it allowed me to do a service program and also explore education at the same time. But no, I didn't have any experience either. So I don't know if we're going to talk about TFA boot camp or Ken, if you want us to go into that right now, the quick training that we took.
Yeah, that would be great, because again, I think that many students contemplating postgraduate service at some point wonder, well, am I prepared? Right. So the boot camp would be a great segue.
And so this is the thing for me, honestly, you know, I can only speak to TFA, but every person, every other core member was extremely hardworking, you know, the type of person where if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to figure it out. You know, like Camille, I think you were saying, like asking for help, and there is no option to fail, right? You're just going to figure it out, make it work, and you're going to do your best. So those are qualities I feel like no matter what the situation is or what your experience, if you approach it with that mindset, you're going to figure it out. It's incredibly hard and challenging. Before they put you in a classroom, you do this 6-week boot camp. So basically I graduated from Gonzaga in May. And then I think the TFA boot camp started, teacher boot camp started in June. I'm not sure if it's different nowadays, but at least back then in 2008, they had a few different regions come together in one location. So we were actually in Houston, and it was like, you know, up at 5:30 in the morning, they put us into these classrooms, like summer school type programs. Most of the kids were in remedial education courses. So they were kids that were struggling. And, you know, we would teach them in the morning and early afternoon, and then in the late afternoon and evening, we were taking classes learning how to be teachers. So you were learning in real time, which was a great way to learn, but it was totally a matter of, this is scary, but I'm gonna do it. And these kids really deserve to have people who will be their advocates and who will work incredibly hard to get them up to grade level, or to get them to learn as much as I possibly can while I have this time with them. So it's all about that mindset you take. And I will say, the first class that I taught in this teacher boot camp, 6-week teacher boot camp, it was a group of first grade kids who who spoke Spanish as their first language. The last time I took Spanish was in high school. So I remember taking a deep breath and being like, okay, I'm supposed to go into this room. I've had about 2 days of teacher training. I'm supposed to teach these first grade Spanish speaking students how to read in English. Okay, here we go. And honestly, at work for the past, 10, 12 years, any circumstance I have, truly, whether it be a presentation in front of, the higher ups or new clients or whatever, I always think, if I can go in front of a group of 20 first grade kids who are all staring up at me and they speak Spanish and I'm supposed to teach them how to read English, I literally can do anything. Like, I've done that. So the TFA experience, it forces you to go into uncomfortable situations and just deal and do your absolute best and work incredibly hard. And I'll take that with me no matter, what career path I end up taking the rest of my life. So yeah.
Cool. Camille, Andrea, anything to add?
I think the only thing I'd add, boot camp, or I think it's institute.
Yeah, well, the official term is institute, but we call it boot camp.
Yeah, it's crazy. My sister-in-law did TFA actually a little bit later and more recently, and she said it's pretty similar, so I don't think it's changed too much. But the thing I was going to add is everybody who joins Teach for America is successful in some way. They are smart, they are hardworking, they probably did well in school, and honestly probably have never failed at anything. And this is an opportunity to fail a lot. And it kind of like creates this, it's a whole new world. Like, I remember a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, everything's always come easy to me and this is so hard. And that ability to fail and keep going is something that is so, so important, I think, in your career, just long-term.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also met all of two of my best friends and roommates at Institute. So it's a really fun, social environment too.
Yeah, I don't want to scare everybody too much. It's super intense, but nothing will bond you like a super intense experience, right? So I'm the same, Camille. I still have, some of my best friends came out of the teaching institute too, not even people from my specific region in Hawaii. So yeah, no, it's great. It's hard, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I would just say before we move on to the next question, totally echo what Catherine and Camille said about the 6-week training programs into boot camp, whatever you want to call it, being kind of like thrown into wildfire. You really have no idea what to expect before you start. And 6 weeks is nowhere near enough to prepare you for something, for anything, let alone being put into a classroom to lead 20 to 30 individuals. So I would say one of the biggest things I learned is just adapting and becoming flexible in different circumstances, especially challenging ones. I know I was so excited for my first day of summer school. We had been preparing for 2 weeks. I had my roster of 25 kids, and I also had a tiny little cohort. So at least I was able to be in that classroom with a few people for the summer session. And, I'd made name tags. I got so excited, showed up to our first day, and I think we had 4 students. 4 students were able to get there that day because of what have you, transportation issues, the family didn't put it on their calendar, whatnot. So every day there was a different amount of students that would show up, and you just kind of had to roll with the punches and, you know, figure it out. And I'd say that's something I still do today. You know, I'm in the HR world, and you plan for something and it totally goes sideways, and you just kind of have to figure it out and hope for the best.
Thank you. And for the students on the call, I'm not exactly sure about something like JVC, but I assume it's similar. I'm a Peace Corps dad, and I know that there was an extensive orientation session once my daughter got in country as well. So there's going to be usually some sort of training, orientation, socialization experience that goes on. So understanding that probably all of you developed your oral presentation sorts of skills by having to be up in front of people in uncomfortable situations, at least to begin with. What other skills do you think you gained from your postgraduate service?
I can kick it off. I think a couple things. One, it's really helped me keep things in perspective. Like, things can get super stressful at work or in life or whatever. And I feel like Teach for America really taught me, like, wow, there's a lot more out there than just like, you know, my little bubble. And so that's something that has been really helpful, especially in like, I'm at a startup right now. Like, things are crazy at startups and it can feel really hard. And I am able to think back at like, well, this is not nearly as stressful as the time I found out. I had a student who thought, she was 7th grade, that thought when you added like multiple digit numbers that you added from left to right, like the hundreds place and the tens place and the ones place first. And like getting over something like that is really hard and has so much more impact on like that one person's life. I'd say the other thing is thinking about problems from different angles or multiple angles. So with teaching, like no student learns the same way. And you really have to learn how to differentiate and like adapt your lessons to make sure that everybody in the classroom is successful. And I've found that that is actually really helpful in a business setting. So for example, I talk to clients all day about product and different things. And the way I frame those conversations can really make or break whether or not it becomes a sales opportunity or, you know, if it becomes a feature in our product or whatever. And you just really learn like how people absorb information. And I think that is a really critical skill.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Camille, on those points. Those are absolutely takeaways for me as well. I think the perspective one is huge, right? So right now, you know, I'm in the communications public relations field, and I will tell my teams like, you guys, we are in PR, not the ER. Like, keep perspective, exactly what you're saying. Like, people are dealing with real life and death issues and really struggling with really important life-changing consequential things. And sometimes, you know, when you're in your career at a startup or communications or whatever it may be, like the challenge in front of you can get incredibly stressful, or client demands can be incredibly stressful. But I find that coming from TFA and doing that for 3 years, I really am able to just kind of maintain this level of calm. You know, when people around me are freaking out or clients get really anxious, I just have such a level of perspective from my 3 years teaching in an extremely impoverished community and everything that comes along with that, that it really takes a lot to rattle me. So that's just a huge takeaway, that perspective. Also, like you were saying, differentiating. So just communication style too, depending on who I'm talking to, just knowing like people learn in different ways, but people also communicate in different ways. And that's a really valuable lesson, whether it be for your professional life or personal life. I also think just grit, right? You know, you hear a lot of the most successful people talk about how grit is the most important quality you can have to be successful in any field or in life in general. And TFA, or, you know, the Peace Corps, other situations like that, I feel like you are like using your grit every single day to get through. And that sticks with you, right? You see the benefits of being full of grit and how far it can take you and refusing to give up. And, you know, when you teach a kid how to read, I mean, it's unbelievable. You teach a kid how to do math, it's unbelievable. Like, it's incredibly rewarding. I still think sometimes I could go back into teaching, because no matter what I accomplish in my current career, nothing is more amazing than teaching another human being how to learn something successfully and instilling that confidence in them. So there's so much that I've learned from TFA, but I would say that that grit, the perseverance, meeting people where they are, knowing that you never know what people are dealing with in their own families behind the scenes. People are dealing with incredibly challenging things. So also really trying to lead with kindness and patience. So, I mean, I could go on and on from the things that I learned. Those are just a few.
Yeah, I mean, hearing Catherine and Camille really solidifies it for me that, you know, there's so many transferable skills you can take from what you learn in the classroom or whatever service style work you are considering into whatever you do next. It's only going to benefit you and make you that much stronger in whatever career path you go down. And I remember when I was considering Teach for America, I was thinking like, oh man, like once I get done with my 2 years, and am I wasting 2 years in the classroom because I don't want to be a teacher forever? And absolutely not. Like, I think because of those 3 years I had in the classroom, it only made me that much stronger to my career path that it is today. And I would say one of the biggest transferable skills that really helped me was probably just prioritization and knowing what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed with all the work. Growing up, I was always an A student. Even in college, I was very successful with school. Coming into Teach for America, I felt overwhelmed every single day, and it was something I really had to figure out for myself and be able to, you know, find the calm in my day, find the peace. Got really into yoga, so find something for you to do, so that you're not just giving everything to whatever it is that you choose to do. But I really learned how to prioritize, and it's easier when you have classes. You can just figure out what's most important for each class, and it's a little different when you have, you know, a classroom of 30 kids and everybody has their own priorities, and you think you want to prioritize every single one of those. So even today, I have to look at my list of what everybody needs. And in the HR world, I'm totally going to use what Catherine said too about the ER situation, because I can use that for HR as well. But I'm constantly having people coming to me with their problems and what they need. And so it can feel overwhelming at times. So I have to take a step back and figure out what really is my priority for the day. And that helps me be successful going into the coming days.
Cool. So an incredibly rewarding, life-changing experience, obviously, for each of you. How did that service reflect on you from the standpoint of recruiters or organizations or employers? What did they make of Teach for America? You did service after school rather than a graduate degree in business or starting your career in other ways.
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say, you know, depending on what service program you do, people will react differently. I feel like, you know, for the most part, organizations like the Peace Corps, generally everybody has positive feelings about that. As Andrea touched on earlier, you know, teaching at a charter school, I also taught at a public charter school, and that situation with Teach for America, Teach for America, I would say, is a polarizing organization. So people who are familiar with it know that people who are accepted into the program are hardworking individuals, probably who, if they come on your team, they're going to work really hard and be a great team player. However, people have very strong feelings towards our public education system, right? Rightfully so. So some people, you know, when I first moved to Seattle about 8 years ago, I had somebody tell me, leave the teaching part on your resume, but remove the Teach for America part, because, you know, in Seattle, a lot of educators have negative feelings about the Teach for America program. You know, it's a Band-Aid on our public education system and what's wrong. And I'm not going to argue that. For me, Teach for America specifically, you know, it's worth it for me to have extremely hardworking people go into the classroom and try to get that group of kids to achieve as much as they possibly can, because we don't want to leave those kids behind, right? So while we're working on fixing bigger systemic issues, which absolutely need to be addressed, I think let's help as many kids as we possibly can while that bigger, greater work is being done. So I say all of that because, just to be totally honest, I got different reactions when recruiters or, hiring folks would see Teach for America on my resume. So I would just be cognizant, if I think for the most part, it's an absolute positive. And I will say, if a TFA core member or alum reaches out to me and wants to work at We Communications, I will go to bat for them for all the reasons we've already talked about. I know that they're hardworking. I know they're reliable, like all of that stuff. But I'll also tell them, I've had some people contact me who want to stay in education, and they'll come to a place like Seattle where there's polarizing feelings about Teach for America, and I'll be honest with them about that. So I will say I 100% would encourage every single student out there to do some kind of service program after college. I think it's incredibly rewarding, and you will gain skills and perseverance from doing that experience in a way that you would not gain from just going into the professional sector. Absolutely. But just know that you have to follow your heart and your gut and go be part of an organization that you truly believe in, and that, whose mission you'll want to continue to carry throughout your career, because there will be people who support that mission, that you'll come up against, and there'll be people who are against it. And that's just the reality. So it's incredibly important to be passionate about the organization that you choose to volunteer for.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that last bit about the importance of being passionate in this work. On one side, there could be some criticism from what you're doing, and different organizations can put off different vibes for different people, whether that's a recruiter, hiring manager, even family members. But I would say it's also it can be a really big resume booster, because of what you're doing is really incredible. People know how hard teachers work. Teachers have amazing street cred. You going into a classroom full of 30 kids or more, depending on what school, shows a lot about yourself. However, that being said, while it is a great resume booster, it can be seen as one. You have to be passionate about the work you're doing to get you through each and every day. Like I said, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, it was by far I can say without a doubt, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I had to keep that mission of Teach for America in the back of my mind, or the forefront of my brain, literally every day, to keep going with all the struggles that I was having. And so I know I used my commute time every morning to pump me up for every single day, and to know, okay, I'm making a difference today. I am pushing the needle here. I can do this. And if you don't have that passion towards the overall mission that Michael went through in the beginning of this session, then you might not make it. So I would really consider and encourage you to look into the mission, talk with people who have gone through the program, whatever you might be considering, to really understand, is this the right thing for me? Why am I doing this? And keep that why to you if you do consider to persevere through it.
And Andrea, just to add one thing onto that, I think 99% of the people who do TFA do it for the right reasons. They believe in educational equity, and they want to give, 100% to try to help as many students as they can. There are a couple of people who get into the program, probably like any, well-known service program, who do it just for that resume builder type thing. And it's really obvious, right? At least in my experience, it was really obvious, because they lacked that passion and that true care for what the program was about, and they did not really last very long. So just want to add that, I think people doing service for any reason is great. But I would really encourage you, number one, to do a service program, absolutely. But number two, really choose one that you believe in. Don't just do it because you think it's going to be a good resume builder, because you think it's going to help you get into a great grad school or law school. That's not, it makes me it makes me feel a little bit angry and nauseous even thinking about that, truly, because like we're trying to emphasize to you guys, it's incredibly hard. And so you need to be in it for the right reasons. Don't just do it as a resume builder, because I don't really think you'll last, to be blunt.
They don't make it. I think you're right. I think if you don't have the that kind of like grittiness and again like willingness to fail and like ability to fail and like just get in there, it'll be very, very hard. I found it interesting. I haven't had a lot of pushback on like TFA on my resume historically. I'm in a different industry, a little bit of a different industry, so that could be why. But I'd say generally from a business angle, like in if you're an analyst or a manager or whatever, I have generally heard really good things. Whenever I'm hiring somebody, if I see TFA on a resume, I'm usually like, okay, that person is a really hard worker and can like handle adverse situations. So I definitely think of it as a really positive thing too. It sounds like you do too. So generally I found it positive. I also went to grad school. I did my MBA at the University of Michigan, and I don't think TFA hurt at all in terms of like that admissions process. One of my roommates was also a former TFA person at school, and we had really, it was pretty interesting because we were kind of different from a lot of the other MBA candidates at the same time. And it showed in terms of like, there were a handful of TFA people in the program, and like we'd always show up at the same like diversity and inclusion initiative meetings or like the social impact club or whatever. And so you definitely end up having a really interesting perspective that can be a really strong suit for a lot of different organizations. So if your plan isn't to stay in teaching forever or whatever, whatever service industry you go into, that's okay. You need to take those years incredibly seriously because you are having such a large impact on somebody's life. But if your long-term goal isn't to be a teacher, you really can take so many lessons from your time and apply them to a lot of different situations that help you, I think, display a unique perspective that others probably don't have.
Cool. How about some examples of how your experiences in TFA have impacted your current level of success, the trajectory of your career, etc.?
One of the biggest takeaways from my time at TFA was one of the many mottos they taught us, which was focus on your locus of control. I can't tell you how many times I think about that every day, how many of my colleagues that I've told that to. It's such an incredibly valuable lesson to focus on your locus of control. I think all of us have tried to lean into that, particularly in 2020. This year has been so wild and there's so many things out of our control, right? So just focusing on what I can control, that's been huge for me in my career. And that was one of the things that I really learned in the school that I taught at. I had a veteran teacher there who really thought it was my way or the highway. And she didn't like us coming in like these new young, howly white people from the mainland. Like, what are you doing here? What do you know? And we all really had to focus on our locus of control, right? We had to be super respectful to her and take some of the advice that she gave us, but also know that, my classroom is my place and that's where I'm going to focus my energy. And so that was a huge lesson that I just continue to take with me. And again, it's been extra helpful this year in the craziness of 2020.
Yeah, I would say for me, one of the biggest takeaways was just the ability to communicate with a variety of different people. When you're in the classroom, you're also working out of the classroom. So you are not only interacting with your students, but you have these relationships with parents, relationships with siblings of your students, administrative staff, fellow teachers. And so on a regular basis, you're constantly having to bend in the way you talk in order to empathize with people in the right way. And I found that was huge for me because growing up and even at Gonzaga, I pretty much spoke and connected with like-minded people. And when I was in Chicago, I was meeting different types of people who walk different types of life literally every day. And now in my career as an HR professional, I'm constantly getting reached out to by people who have walked different paths as well. I don't know what their backgrounds are. I don't know where they came from. We have people that are from all different places of the world. And so I have to be able to connect with them and understand, how is this conversation going to go? How am I able to present myself in a way that's, sensitive, but also I'm intelligent and I know how to be able to communicate with you so that they trust me. And I think at the end of the day, like, you want to be able to build those relationships, whether, you stay in whatever service related field you're going into, or you're doing something completely different that's going to only benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, those are both really good. I'm trying to think of what else I can add to that. I would say that the TFA network is pretty amazing. Even if you haven't like never met that person, you have like this instant connection that you can, rely on in different ways. And that is such a powerful thing in your professional career, to have that access. So I think, being an active participant in the organization can really help in the long run, whether you're career switching, you need advice on a project you're working on, whatever. You do have this like amazing network of very intelligent and hardworking people.
I totally agree with that, Camille. And that's an interesting thing about TFA is that some people do stay on in education, right? As educators or administrators or what have you. Other people become lawyers, other people become doctors. I go into communications, HR, startups. It's like, but foundationally, we all have that experience of teaching in Title I schools in rough, impoverished communities. And not only does that bond you, but it affects your worldview, right? Everybody goes to Gonzaga, I think, for a certain reason, and Jesuit teaching and whatnot. Hopefully people who are at Gonzaga are there because you care about the world and making the world a better place, right? And Teach for America is an extension of that. And so like you're saying, Camille, no matter what situation I'm in, it could be at a social gathering, pre-2020, or a professional networking event or whatever. If somebody says that they're a TFA alum, you instantly feel this connection and bond with them because at your root, at your core, you have those same foundational values. And again, everything that TFA espouses is an extension of what Gonzaga and the Jesuit tradition espouses as well.
Okay, the big question everybody's waiting on. What advice would you guys give to our students who are currently considering postgraduate service opportunities? It could be general advice, it could be certain classes or co-curricular things to do while they're at Gonzaga. Just throw it open on the advice dimension.
All right, well, I'll kick us off. I would say a million, zillion, trillion% do it. Do a service program. If it were up to me, I think it was the Kennedys who initially said, we should have a national service program. Everybody serves for a year or 2 years after you graduate from college, and it can help, pay for some of your student debt. I'm hopeful maybe we'll still eventually have a program like that. But you learn so much about yourself and the world and communities and just being a good human being through doing a service program. So the way that I kind of think about it is I feel like in life, you have two real opportunities to do something like Peace Corps or TFA or whatever that program may be, Jesuit Volunteer Corps. It's either like right after you graduate from college or when you retire. Because for most people in between, there's probably going to be a marriage, kids, professional career, whatever it may be. So for me, it was so incredibly valuable because we were young, we had endless energy, we could commit 100% of our energy and passion to helping kids learn, right? Because I didn't have, the responsibilities of a family and whatnot. So I could really devote all of my time and energy to doing it. And it's just such an incredibly powerful, impactful thing to do. And I just think it's so beneficial. And again, forever, we're all going to take that understanding of having a real experience of seeing inequity in action on a daily basis and the systemic issues that are going on in this country, right? And we have profoundly deep learnings about that from doing TFA. So that affects my conversations I have with people. It affects who I vote for. It affects the volunteer work that I do now. I'm in communications, and I support communications for, the Gates Foundation, biggest nonprofit in the world. I do communications for the lead of philanthropies at Microsoft. You better believe that my experience in TFA affects the advice that I give them and, how I encourage them to approach talking to their target audiences. So no matter what you choose to do in life, having a year, 2, 3 years of having, a profoundly challenging but meaningful and impactful service experience, it will only benefit you and make you a better person. So I hope I've made it very clear that I would support all of you to do that.
I was like trying to think of ideas and literally I wrote down "do it" was like the only thing I wrote down. So yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. You meet amazing people. You'll meet some of your best friends. My now husband did TFA, different core, different area, but like find these connections into the network. And I think like what you can do between now and institute or boot camp, but institute and getting into the classroom, like honestly, I don't know if there are like any special classes or things you can do. But the nice thing about going to Gonzaga is you are taught as a whole person, right? Like the Jesuit education teaches the whole person. And so, so much of what you're doing right now is already contributing to your, potential success in the future. So I think it's like lead with passion, like do it if it's right for you. Don't do it just as a resume builder. It helps your resume, but don't do it just for that reason. And really find the thing that like kind of makes you tick, because it will live with you for a very long time. And it will influence what you care about in, the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to echo what Catherine and Camille both mentioned. And I would say, similar to what I was saying before, like you must know the why of why you're going into this, because that's what's gonna drive you. And it really needs to be, your North Star as you continue through year 1, 2 years, 3 years, however long your program might be. And, thinking about like how I could have prepared, maybe, reaching out. Now we have this great world of LinkedIn. I don't think it was nearly as big even when I graduated in 2014. Reach out to fellow past core members, learn about their experience, hop on some Zoom calls with them, learn about what went well for them in their first year, and maybe it might save you some time and maybe some tears as well to learn. I know going into my experience, I really didn't know about the history of all the racial injustices in Chicago. And I think I really had to learn as I was going, and it would have been really nice to take some time. I think I had you don't really have that much time. I think it was like a month in between graduation and starting the institute. But if I would have taken that time to, read about, the white flight and everything, that might have helped me somewhat prepare to go in. But honestly, it's one of those programs where you learn as you go and you kind of just have to sink or swim. But as I also mentioned before, ask for help when you need it. Go set up office hours with one of those experienced teachers. I know, I called my mom every single day. She was a teacher in a completely different area. She had 80% white, whereas mine was 100% African-American, completely different experiences. But I could still ask her about, how do I teach a first grader to read that doesn't even know their alphabet? So being able to make yourself vulnerable, put yourself out there, and hope for the best.
And Ken, I would say one more thing too, just for students, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, whatever level you're at, I really would just encourage you to get involved, volunteer. Gonzaga has so many cool volunteer opportunities, service clubs, non-service clubs. Just get out there and take advantage of all of these incredible, organizations that are at your fingertips. I think we've all kind of expressed, how wonderful the Jesuit education is, and you're really lucky to be at a place like Gonzaga. I think we have some students that are also from other schools. I'm sure your schools are great as well, but go Zags. But for all college students, now is your time to really explore and learn and grow. And so get involved. I would just encourage you to volunteer and do as many programs as you can, because, the best way to learn about yourself and what your interests are and what your interests aren't, is to just get out there and try stuff. So I would encourage you to do that.
I will, in addition to all that great information, I guess I would just add a very dad thing, a very practical part, particularly if you do Peace Corps or certain locations within JVC. Make sure you understand the on-ramp process, if you will. So if a passport is involved or shots are involved, you want to know the timing of those things and when you need to have those done. You don't want to let logistics like that get in the way of you being able to begin your post-grad experience. But and passports these days can take forever. Shots, depending on where you're going, may not be available at your local Walgreens. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking of JVC or Peace Corps. There can be some logistical things while you're still at home that can tie things up. Other questions from the audience? Okay. Oh. Michael, let me throw it back to you. And thank you to the three of you. That was wonderful and very, very educational and informative, and I think a great benefit to our students. Michael?
Yeah, I want to thank you all so much. I would love if we had more time to echo a lot of what you guys said. I've met many TFA alumni over these last few months, and you know, talked from people from the Peace Corps who are or JVC. You know, a lot of what you said is pretty universal in these service style programs. So I want to thank you. I think it was really valuable information. And just to sign us off, thank you, Dean Anderson. Thank you, Molly Pepper, and thank you to our panelists.